I think that is such an important part about just life, especially being an entrepreneur, that I have learned is how do you manage risk? And if you can apply that kind of Bayesian method of thinking into other parts of your life, you are just going to be so much more successful. But then also recognizing the humility you have to have in recognizing that luck and the randomization of
Hmm.
events, how that important that plays out. And when you can kind of think about that in this sort of three-dimensional game in life, that how important how luck plays a role and how randomization plays a role and how you can still
Yeah.
make the best decisions but it doesn't turn out your way.
Mm,
That's poker teaches you that sometimes in a very
totally.
very brutal way. Hi, everyone. My name is Raquel Baldelamar, and welcome to the Mega Podcast, where I speak with high achievers on how they fulfill their professional dreams while maintaining balance throughout their lives. Today, I am with Maria Ho, a Hall of Fame professional poker player and award-winning TV broadcaster and strategic commentator who has amassed over $5 million in live and tournament poker earnings. She was born in Taipei, Taiwan, and immigrated with her parents to the U.S. when she was 4 years old. She attended the University of California in San Diego and graduated in 2005 with a major in communications and a minor in law. She pursued her passion for music and has performed in several musicals. And today, Maria is one of the most recognized and successful female poker pros in the world. In 2011, she became the #2 ranked female poker player worldwide. And as of 2025, Maria sits in the #2 spot on the WSOP's Women's All-Time Money list. Outside of poker, Maria is also involved in charitable pursuits, dedicating substantial time to volunteering and charitable events. Her current life chapter is a balanced mix of poker, music, business, and philanthropy. Maria, welcome to the Mega Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited that you're here just because, as a fellow poker player, not professional, just weekend player, it's poker's so hard. So it's so amazing meeting other women who have done it, who are professional poker pros. So it's such an honor to meet you and to be here with you. I want to ask you about growing up in Taiwan first. You're born there.
Yeah, I mean, I feel I don't remember that much of my childhood in Taiwan, but it was so interesting to come to the US at such a young age
You're
and
four, right?
yeah, and to kind of feel like I was stuck between two worlds because the way that my parents wanted to raise us versus what we were getting from school and having to kind of traverse balancing both cultures when
Hmm.
they both kind of seem so unfamiliar to me.
Do you still speak Mandarin?
I do speak Mandarin, and I think I have my parents to thank for that
Uh-huh.
because growing up, even though we lived in the States, they forced us to speak Mandarin in the house.
Uh-huh.
So if I was hungry, my mom would not give me food unless I asked for it in Chinese. But back then, I hated it because all I wanted to do was fit in. All I wanted to do was assimilate with my friends at school and to be like everybody else. And I was, why do I need to learn Chinese when we live in America? But now it's just so nice to be able to speak another language. And that's definitely something that I want to pass on to my children as well.
How do you maintain Mandarin? Because I also grew up in another country. I grew up in Bolivia for the first 10 years of my life. So Spanish is my first language. And I remember dreaming in Spanish. I mean, that was that was my default language, and it wasn't until I came to the United States I learned English. And my mom is American, so she taught me English. But it took me a while for English to become my default language. And then I now, as an adult, I realized I have to practice to if I, otherwise I lose it. So
Yeah.
how do you practice Mandarin?
It's mainly speaking to my parents
Really?
still, and every once in a while, I'll force myself to watch maybe a Chinese
Mm-hmm.
soap opera or
Mm-hmm.
something that kind of feels more immersive. But I definitely could use more practice. Like, I feel like my vocabulary is slipping to maybe like,
You have to
uh,
think about it.
yeah,
Yeah.
like I feel like I speak in grade school, right? Like, I don't
Yeah.
have access to certain
Yeah.
words in Chinese, but it's something that I want to continue to build on.
Can you ever dream in Mandarin?
No, no, I never
Right?
dream in Mandarin,
Right.
but like sometimes I'll think curse words in Mandarin in my head
Uh-huh.
though. And when it comes in real handy is when I'm with someone else who speaks Chinese and I want to say something about like something else that's going on
Mhm.
around us and it feels like it's nice to have this language where nobody knows what you're
Right.
talking about.
So your parents moved here. I read that you grew up, spent a lot of time with your maternal grandmother, who
Mhm.
really raised you while your parents worked. What was it like for them when they came to the United States?
It was really hard. They came here with pretty much nothing in their pocket. They genuinely came to chase the American dream. I know that that is probably a story that a lot of people can relate to when they immigrate to the
Mhm.
States. It's just this idea of a land of better opportunities. And it was definitely that for my parents. My dad actually came over to the States first and left me and my sister behind with my mom to suss out what opportunities there would be, right? It was like, okay, well, why don't you go ahead and kind of see what life would be like if you feel like you can make it there before moving your entire family with you. And so he came to the States and saw some opportunities in some things that he was already doing in Taiwan. He was a tour guide in Taiwan. So that was one of his first jobs when he moved to the States, was to become a tour guide for Chinese speaking tourists that wanted to visit America. And that was something that like came very easily and naturally to him. But for sure, I remember living kind of in a really, really small apartment where we only had one bedroom to share between the four of us. And so it definitely wasn't easy, but my parents are really, really hard workers and they did everything in their power to give us a comfortable life, even in some of those early years.
I mean, I think that's where you learned the American dream, which you've been able to apply into your own life, pursuing something such an unconventional career path. Was it hard for them, do you say, adjusting to the American way of life?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I feel like what was hardest for them is just missing all of the comforts of home, right?
Mhm.
They did not love different cuisines. They
Mhm.
really always wanted to eat Chinese food. So my mom would cook a lot because she didn't feel like she could get that authentic
Mhm.
Chinese food elsewhere. And I think they missed having their community. And their English was not very good when they came here. It was like okay, it was like passable, but just to be so overwhelmed by all the signs being in English and everybody around them speaking English. I know that that was hard. They felt like they couldn't communicate, and it was hard to make friends because of that. But slowly, they found their own community of other Chinese immigrants
Mhm.
in the States and in the place that we live
Where did
specifically.
you guys live?
So we ended up settling in Arcadia, California, which is a little bit it's by Pasadena area
Mhm.
for people who aren't that familiar. But it's just one of those areas that I think as the years went on, there were more and more Taiwanese Chinese immigrants that kind of knew that there were other people from the same area as
Mhm.
them that settled there. So they slowly began to build this community, but it definitely wasn't easy at first.
And I read that your mother really wanted to teach you traditional Chinese culture. She made you learn Chinese instruments. You had to attend Chinese cultural classes when you were younger. What was that?
um, It was interesting because I think I was so resistant to it, right? I
Yeah.
was like, okay, we're in America now, so why can't I do American things?
Mhm.
It felt like a waste of my time that my mom was forcing me to do this.
And why do you think she
Um,
wanted to do that? Did she want to have you retain that connection to your
yes.
Chinese heritage?
Absolutely. It was definitely because she wanted to make sure that I knew where I came
Mhm.
from and to make sure that that wasn't lost on me. Just some of the things that she grew up with in her childhood and the ability to like carry that forward for future
Mhm.
generations. I think that was really important to her.
But then when you became a teenager, you started rebelling. Like many of us do. I rebelled. I also was I had a fake ID at 17. I was going to
Same.
clubs. I was getting involved with much older boys. I
Hmm.
had definitely my own rebelliousness, but talk about that always comes from somewhere. You know,
Yeah.
where did that rebelliousness come for you? Was it just adjusting to the US way of life? Was it something else where that rebelliousness came from?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of it came from just how strict my parents were, specifically
Mhm.
my mom. She was definitely a tiger mom. Just how um, important it was for us to do everything her way, for us to treat school the like it's the most important thing, to the point where we weren't allowed to have extracurricular activities. She didn't encourage us to be in sports and to do other things because she just always emphasized the importance of education. So all we
Mhm.
could do was go to school, come home, study, take extra classes. She even had like a small tutoring class that she ran out of our garage for us and like two other Chinese kids in our neighborhood. And just like that type of kind of like restraint and that much pressure that she put on us just forced me to like want to go completely the other direction.
Mhm.
Um, and I think also my sister, I have an older sister, and she was so perfect and she lived up to all of their expectations and she towed that straight line, that it made me want to be the opposite of that, because she always valued so heavily what they thought. And I knew that I didn't want to be like her, and probably because I thought I couldn't be as good
Mhm.
at it as she was,
I'm just
right?
going to choose my own
So
path.
exactly. So that kind of, I think, forced me in the other
So
direction.
how did your rebelliousness manifest itself?
In so many ways, like I definitely, like you, I had a fake ID. I was going out a lot. I was hanging out with the wrong crowd. Like I
Mhm.
purposely would insert myself into groups that I knew my parents would not approve
Mhm.
of. I was ditching class. I wasn't taking education seriously at all.
You went to an
Um,
all girls private school.
I got
Yeah.
sent there
Sent
because of
there.
how
Oh
rebellious
my
I was.
goodness.
So I
Oh my god.
started out in public
Yeah.
school. Like my whole life,
Uh-huh.
I was allowed to go to public school
And
until my
then
freshman year of high school, when that was like my big rebellious year. And
uh-huh.
then my parents were like, "We've had enough. You need more discipline."
But it seems you also had a strong head in your shoulders in that you didn't let the rebelliousness go too far. Would you say? Or I mean, did you say, wow, you said, I think I remember reading that said you wouldn't have graduated if you hadn't gone to that all girls
For
private
sure.
school.
I was definitely a rebel without a cause,
Uh-huh.
right? Like I didn't have any other reason for doing it other than the fact that I just wanted to upset my
Yeah.
parents and go against what they wanted
Yeah.
from me. So I did have that understanding that like this was a phase and I'm just kind of doing it to piss them off. And it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't like the direction I was going to take my whole life.
Right.
But especially them putting me in the all girls Catholic school, where I actually had to board there as well. So I lived there.
Wow.
They didn't even want me to live at home. I think that really whipped me into shape because I really had nothing else I could do. Like I didn't have access to all of my friends that were troublemakers, and they were
Mm-hmm.
pressuring me to get into trouble with them. And I couldn't do anything else but focus on school. So
I think you have to also learn how that rebelliousness streak can be a good thing.
mhm.
That's an independence. It's an ability. You don't care what people think about you. I've always subscribed to Helen Gurley Brown's mantra of good girls go to heaven, bad girls go everywhere.
I love that.
So you want to be just bad enough to
hmm
go everywhere, but you have to also know where is what's too much. And I mean,
Yeah.
so um, I think for me, learning, just even becoming an entrepreneur, I mean, it requires just such a fearlessness and such
Mhm.
having a rebelliousness streak and being able to not really care what people think about you. And
Yeah.
and that really, I think, so I think having a rebelliousness streak can be good. You can't let it go too far.
Yeah. Definitely.
So you went to University of California in San Diego. You
Yes.
talk about how you love music. You sang in a band. You love performing. Did you try to make a career out of music?
No, because I think I was just too practical to think that
Hmm.
I could make it in music. It always just seemed more like a hobby to me, and I think I always had this doubt in my head, like, "Oh, I don't think I'm good enough," or "It's not really going to be a viable way to make a living." So I
Hmm.
think I just never really allowed myself to entertain it. But in college was where I was able to really do things that I loved, right? And to like
Hmm.
pursue something like music, even recreationally, because again, I wasn't allowed to have many extracurriculars in middle school or in high school. And so that was the first time that I felt free to really explore my interests. And singing was definitely
And
a big
you were
passion.
part of a cappella group.
I was, yeah. And again, like I think that was like my sister's influence as well, because even though I hate to admit it, but she knows this now, like I looked up to my sister and I felt like she accomplished so much. And because she was older than me, she kind of set this path. And she was in her college a cappella group. So I was like, okay, well, I want to be in
Hmm.
my college a cappella group. Yeah.
Hmm. And you also really started performing. I mean, not just music, but performing. And that has also led to other work that you've done. You've been in The Amazing Race. You've been in the American Idol show. Talk about how music is related to being in reality TV, being in front of the camera.
Yeah, it's funny because I never really thought that I would be someone that would be comfortable in front of the camera, but I feel like especially during my college years in a cappella and in performing in musicals, I realized that there was a little bit of a thrill kind of attached to conquering this fear of performing in front of other people. Um, It's interesting because to this day, I still get really nervous to sing in front of people. Like
Really?
sometimes when my friends will be like, "Oh, let's hear you sing," I'll have to like turn around and I can't look at them in the eye. But it's almost like a fear that I still have in the back of my mind that every time I kind of step outside of that comfort zone and challenge myself, I feel this little bit of like thrill and also a lot of just like gratification of being able to do that. And so I didn't expect to go down this path of like being on a reality competition show. But again, I have a very competitive nature, and those things just kind of all fit with my personality of like, oh, I'm not afraid to be who I am and to kind of show myself in this way and to be vulnerable because the Amazing Race was very hard and it wasn't
Hmm.
something I was like naturally very good at because of the physical element. Like I'm not a very physically kind of fit person or I'm not like that athletic naturally. And so it was just one of those things where it's like if I see a challenge, I want to take it on head first.
So talk about a challenge. Let's talk about poker now. I mean, that was, and you got into it in college, right?
Hmm.
So very, very few women were playing poker, much less than now.
Yeah.
How did you get into poker?
So it was my first year in college. I was living in the dorms and I
Mhm.
had a good group of guy friends that I would hang out with on a regular basis. But every Friday night, they would be like, oh, it's boys' night. We're doing our own thing. And I was always like, what do you guys do at boys' night? Like,
Mhm.
why can't I come? And then I found out that they were playing poker. And I hate this idea of like, oh, women don't
Yeah.
belong in certain spaces. So I kind of force my way in by bribing them with a keg of beer. I just showed up
I love
because
that.
I knew what dorms they lived in. I knew
Yeah.
where this game was. So I just like showed up and was like, let me in, teach me how to play. I had never played before. And I was hooked after that first game.
What got you hooked? Other than that it requires you being very competitive. You have to you use your competitive nature. But what got you hooked into poker, would you say?
I think I always loved card games growing up. Like strategy card games was always something really fun for me. I learned bridge from my grandfather when I was really young, and
Mhm.
we would play at a local bridge club. And so there was that element of the strategy of poker. There was also that human element of, um, I very quickly realized there is this like psychological element of you sitting across from your opponents, and it's a little bit of like you're matching wits, and it's like
Mhm.
trying to outdo them or trying to outsmart them in some way. And I liked the nature of like the game kind of pitting you against your competition in that way.
Oh yeah, it requires so many skills. And for everyone who just wants to see Maria in her element, I would recommend to watch episode 8 of Game of Gold, where you really are doing that. You are matching wits. You're really on multiple levels doing the math, doing the psychology, ranging people, all of the elements that really go into being a good poker. I saw that, and that's why you're the number 2 ranked female poker player, in the world. So that's really amazing that you can do
Thank
that.
you. Yeah, it's so interesting because I think poker is a people like human game
Mhm. Oh
first,
yeah.
right? Like a lot of people are like, "Oh, do you have to be good at math to be good at poker?" And I'm like, "Not really." Like I would not say that the math is the thing that holds people back from being a great poker player. I think it's like being able to understand the mindset of other people and then
Yeah.
also implementing strategy and kind of blending this. It's like an art form, right? There's
Very
like a
much
little
so.
bit of that like secret sauce of like psychological element and this that and the other, but then with a foundation of strategy and math. But it doesn't mean that if you don't excel in math that you cannot be a good poker player.
What I love about poker, I got into it about 5 years ago. And I only play cash games. I've never done tournaments. But what I immediately saw in this game format, where it's just incredibly layered, there are many nuances.
Mhm.
It's a game of incomplete information. But I have seen that poker is the best mini analog to real life complex decision making that you can have. I mean, so if all the applications you learn in poker of how to be well, if you can apply that analogy outside of life, and there's just so many analogies that I have taken from poker into other parts of my life. And I just think it's such a beautiful game, and it's the best analog to real life complex decision making.
Yeah, and I love hearing you say that because I feel like a lot of people, there is still this stigma about poker being gambling or the way that poker is portrayed, whether it's in media or even in
Hmm.
movies, right? It always seems to be something that should be played in the shadows. And it's not something that, it's not a skill game. It's not a strategy game. It's not a game that requires all of these complex decision making
Hmm.
processes that you're talking about. But what I want people to understand about poker is that it is all that and so much more because there are so many ways in which poker has taught me about life and
Yeah.
how I've been able to apply poker in other decisions that I make. And also, this idea of taking risks and analyzing risk and
Yeah.
making calculated risks and taking calculated risks in an environment outside of the game, like in real life where you're making a business decision or you're investing in something or you're deciding if, or you're just like deciding if this is somebody that you want to have in your life, or
Yeah.
there's just
Yeah.
reading people and all of that just goes into a lot of decisions you make on a
Huge.
daily basis.
If you want to, for everyone who wants to learn more about risk, I highly recommend the book, The Art of Risking Everything. By Nate Silver. Maria Ho is actually featured in it, and he talks about risk in the book On the Edge, The Art of Risking
Hmm.
Everything. He talks about risk, and I think that is such an important part about just life, especially being an entrepreneur, that I have learned is how do you manage risk and how do you have this Bayesian way of thinking where you go to the table with a certain set of assumptions, and then you're constantly adjusting those assumptions based on new evidence. And it's a
Yes.
very similar thing in poker. You have to you are ranging people. You have this set of ideas of what your opponent has, and based on what happens on every single street, then that range gets narrowed down. So
Yes.
you have to learn how to, if you can apply that kind of Bayesian method of thinking into other parts of your life, you are just going to be so much more successful. But then also recognizing the humility you have to have in recognizing that luck and the randomization of
Hmm.
events, how that important that plays out. And when you can kind of think about that in this sort of three-dimensional game in life, that how important how luck plays a role and how randomization plays a role and how you can still
Yeah.
make the best decisions but it doesn't turn out your way.
Mm,
That's poker teaches you that. Sometimes in a very,
totally.
very brutal way, it
Yes.
teaches you that.
Yes. And I think, like, very much to your point, I think that poker has this element of you can do everything right and
Right.
then the outcome can still not go your way. And it's about kind of dealing with those setbacks, like you
Yeah.
mentioned about being an entrepreneur. It's like you can make really well informed decisions, but because of all the other factors outside of your control, it
Mhm.
might not get you the result that you were looking for, but that doesn't necessarily mean the information you took that got you to the decision that you made was wrong, right? So it's about
Right.
being able to kind of emotionally
Oh,
separate
yeah.
how you came to that conclusion in the process from the outcome.
And it really requires holding two very different sets, competing opposite emotions. One is extreme confidence, extreme aggressiveness, because to be a good poker player, you have to know how to be, you have to be very aggressive. You have to know how
Hmm.
to find those lines to bluff.
Yes.
And then you have to have humility, an
Mm.
incredible amount of humility. And it is being able to kind of traverse between those two opposite ends, which I
Yeah.
think is so challenging. And the really incredible poker players know how to do that because you talk about not having entitlement, not having
Yeah.
to say, "Oh, I should have won that flip."
Right.
So
Right.
it's really hard to balance this. So how do you try to balance that within yourself?
It takes a lot of effort and energy that you have to consciously tell yourself in really big moments in the game that if you kind of zoom out and look at the game as a whole, like you have to look at it as it's a long game, right? So
Hmm.
no matter what happens in one single hand or in one decision or against one specific opponent, like you have to look at poker as like a set of decisions that you're making one after the other, and that's always going to, and trying to make the best decision possible, and then continuing to do that over and over again regardless of the result. And so I
Hmm.
always kind of have to remember that um I think poker is not a meritocracy in that way, right? I think there's a lot of different jobs or hobbies you could pursue where the amount of effort and energy you put into being good at something will equate to this direct result of you seeing it come to fruition, or there's going to be some reward at the end for the fruits of your labor. But in poker, you could play all day and you could make all the right decisions and you can still lose.
Right.
You can show up to work and essentially lose money even if you had
Yeah.
spent all this time studying and preparing and being in the best position possible, right, to make good decisions that day. And so I think poker has just really humbled me so much, um, that I just don't really equate kind of the outcome to it being a direct reflection of something that I did. But it's also important to be able to separate the times where to be able to look at it and be like, what did I do wrong in this situation?
Mhm.
Because so often in poker, people end up defaulting to blaming luck or
Mhm.
blaming their opponent for making a mistake, which caused them to maybe play their hand differently or to make a mistake. And I always want to look at it first of like, what can I do differently? What did I do that maybe I could have done better? And then
Mhm.
think about, okay, how did luck play a factor in this? And also just to remember that because of that element of luck that's involved in poker,
Mhm.
um, you should never go in thinking that there's no such thing as like deserve, right? Like
Mhm.
because luck chooses you. You don't get to choose when you're going to be lucky or when it's going to be your day. And you just have to remember, well, this is also why we play the game, right? Is it's a beautiful game because anybody on any given day can beat anybody.
Right. How do you deal with the variance, would you say, when you are having those downswings, which happens to even poker pros? How do you manage the variance on those downswings?
I think it has to do with just having other things outside of poker that grounds you because I
Mhm.
know so many people that are so consumed by poker. And
Mhm.
so poker is their entire life. And so it makes kind of them not doing well on any given day or in a specific tournament, it kind of ends up rippling out to everything else and having like this feeling of like, okay, um, doubting themselves, second guessing themselves. But I'm always able to kind of go back to various things. Like if I feel like I maybe didn't do well that day, I'm able to like go and study that spot and it makes me feel
Mhm.
better. It gives me that control back a little bit of being like, okay, so I'm on a downswing. Maybe I didn't make the best decisions. Maybe I got a little unlucky, but
Mhm.
what things are within my control to prevent that from happening next time? But also, I have other things that bring me joy outside of
Yeah.
poker. So, poker is what I do, but it's not who I am.
Right.
And it's not all of my interests and everything that I do does not revolve around poker. And so, I think that really helps kind of just give me that break mentally from the game when I'm going through a downswing.
You talk about studying at your level of where you are. What how is your studying now compared to, let's say, when you were doing the mid stakes grinding game?
It's totally night and day, and in some ways it's a little more boring, I would
Uh-huh.
say now, because I think studying is so much more structured in this day and age of solvers, right?
Yeah.
I think when I first learned poker, those solvers were not available to us. There was not this kind of input output of like this is exactly what you should be doing
Mhm.
in this specific scenario.
Mhm.
It was a lot of like guesswork. It's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of like talking to your friends and being like, how would you play this hand? Or how would you have approached this situation? And then fine tuning your own strategy from there. But now that there's almost this like immediate kind of like definitive answer of what you've done wrong or how you can play a hand better, it makes it very, I think, rigorous for people to study that way. Um, but nowadays, like my studying will involve a multitude of different things. Like I will study solvers. I will kind of just sit in front of the computer,
Mhm.
open up the program, input certain situations. But I also still do a lot of talking to my friends and talking to players whose game I respect because I always believe you can learn
Yeah.
from the people around you.
Yeah.
I'm not too egotistical to ask for help or to say, like, I don't think I get this situation. Like, why is the solver telling me this? Like, I'm not afraid to ask those questions at the risk of maybe my colleagues or opponents sometimes being like, huh, Maria doesn't understand this. Like, that's weird. I thought
Mhm.
she was supposed to be like a top poker pro.
Yeah.
But I always ask questions. And I also just challenge kind of the solver in the sense of there is this human element to poker. And no matter what, you should always weave that into this really like um finite kind of like definitive way of studying. And so I always remember that the best poker players in the world are able to deviate from these
Absolutely.
strategies because they're paying attention to that human element. So kind of never losing sight and losing touch of that.
Yeah, humans do not play GTO.
No.
So, yeah, understanding that. For me, it's been also finding a community of people that you can connect with and
Yeah.
you can learn from. The poker community that I'm involved with is really they're a bunch of artists. The founder of the group I'm with was a rap artist. They're
Awesome.
musicians, so they're
Ah,
musicians, they're painters, they're artists, they're
yeah.
writers, and they're savages.
Yeah.
So and then to see this group of people who can also who can find creative exploits and then can help
Hmm.
that they've really helped me learn how to find those lines to bluff because I
Yeah.
feel as my one of my weaknesses was I just never knew those lines to bluff. I knew I
Hmm.
should bluff, but I couldn't find those lines. And again, being creative, understanding what the solver should do, but then understanding where
Yes,
is it appropriate to bluff, especially in those live games when you can find what the tells are doing.
definitely.
So I have found having a community of people who can
Hmm.
kind of help you is very, very helpful.
Yeah.
Where um you also talk though about poker can be super lonely, especially at your level.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's the adversarial nature of poker, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because poker is an individual game.
Right.
So there's no such thing as like collaboration or teamwork, right? So I think it gets lonely because, as I just mentioned, these people are my friends, but they're also my opponents. Like
Right.
one day I will be sitting across from the table and they will be somebody that I will have to take their chips in this zero sum way in order
Mm-hmm.
for me to win. And so
Mm-hmm.
there's always kind of almost like a wall that I put up to maybe not get too
Too close.
close,
Yeah.
because I know that it's so cutthroat at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Um, and also being a woman in a male dominated industry also feels really lonely, right? Even simple things like traveling around for poker tournaments and not being able to share a room because there's not another woman that's
Mm-hmm.
traveling to the same stop, whereas like guys are always able to kind of like find a travel partner or somebody to
Mm-hmm.
like share a room with and to like rent an Airbnb with. Like I would only feel comfortable staying with other women, but there just aren't that many other women that are kind
Right.
of doing what I'm doing or playing in that same tournament. And so I miss that. I love like having other women around me, even though I can fit in with the guys. I just love having that feminine energy. And I don't really have that in poker, whether it's away from the tables or at the tables. And so that's why I think it got a little lonely for me.
Also, I mean, according to just the latest statistics, only 5% of women play poker. Uh, Nate Silva wrote a long section about why are
Mhm.
there more women in poker. Daniel Negreanu talks about many factors, including one of them has to do with the biological differences in women. Do you think women are less competitive than men?
No, I think a lot of it has to do with social conditioning.
Right.
I don't think it's really that biological. I really feel like we grow up in a society where I think women are not taught to be aggressive because being aggressive as a woman can be seen as a negative trait, or being too competitive as a woman can be seen as a negative trait. And I feel like growing up, my family never really even encouraged me to like take risks, right? I think they held this spot of like, okay, this line of as a woman, you're supposed to do certain things, you're supposed to fulfill certain expectations. And none of them kind of involved like doing something risky or thinking outside of the
Mm-hmm.
box, right? It was always very like this conventional path that our family, our parents, our teachers kind of set out for us, and they don't even realize that they're putting these stipulations on us as women. Whereas men, I think, are always encouraged to like go for the gold or like swing for the fences. Like even all of these like phrases and euphemisms and things that people
Mm.
use, it's like always like encouraging men to like to risk everything to like achieve their dreams, right? And I don't think women are taught that. I think women are very much taught to just
Right.
do something practical and to make sure that we kind of understand our place in
And women can
society.
have a very distinct advantage in poker. I have
Yes.
learned as women, we are we are better at communication, and which means we're also better at communicating only the emotions we want to express. Whereas men tend to be, especially when they're frustrated, when they're under a lot of pressure, they're not able to hide their emotions better. So you can pick up on those little
Uh-huh.
tells. One of the things I have realized is doing table talks when you're on a
Oh,
river play.
yeah.
If you can, we know, which is you did this very well in some of the Game of Gold series. I saw you just the table talk you used to get information out of your opponents.
Mhm.
And I have found that using that communication skill and then picking up information from people is very valuable. So I do agree. I think what I love about you, Maria, is that you really are an advocate for female poker players. You really promote that, not just having women do ladies events, but
Yeah.
all kinds of events, playing the male dominated field. Because it is true, even in so much of the world, there's been equality with in terms of more women are still getting into it. But in poker, it's still very, very male focused.
Yeah, and it doesn't really make sense because this is like a mind sport and
It
there's
is very
no
much. Yeah.
yeah, there's just no inherent disadvantage we would have as women to be able to compete well and to be able to compete on the same level as men. So it's so weird that they try to segregate us at times with women's events and things like that. And
Hmm.
so it's just something that I want to continue to push for is to see women get into the game not just because they think they would like the game of poker, but because in your life, as you mentioned, it's transcended just the game, just being able to apply it in so many other different
Yeah.
ways. I feel like there's so many lessons that can be learned through the game of poker. And I want women to be able to discover that because I think it's really empowering to then use it in other aspects of
Well,
their
and
life.
we'll get into some of your charitable efforts, but I definitely see you helping young women, especially get into poker, expose them at a young age because they don't get exposed to it. I didn't get exposed to poker until 5 years ago. I mean, really seriously, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's not given to women. And then when they see just what a beautiful game it is and how it teaches you so
Hmm.
many practices, I think you are in a really incredible position to be able to really show that to a lot of different young girls who to teach them those skills. Let's talk about poker as a job. I have a lot of friends in my poker community that I'm with. They are mid-stake grinders. I mean,
Hmm.
they are low to mid-stake grinders. Um, it's their job. They,
Yeah.
they they see poker as their job. But sometimes in your job, you're not going to always be on your A game.
Hmm.
But if you're a poker player, when you're not on your A game, it can be very costly.
Yeah.
So a regular job, you can go and check in, do your computer. You're not always on, and it's okay.
Hmm.
It's not gonna be the end of the world. But if you
Right.
do that as a poker player, it can really, really negatively affect you. So, but as a poker pro, you can't just say, "Oh, I'm not going to show up to work today because I don't feel good." How do you talk about also having to work so hard and be dedicated, but how do you do that when your poker is your job, but you're not going to always be your best every single day?
Yeah, I think it's kind of practicing being present and mindfulness in your life in general so that you can show up in poker that way as well.
Hmm.
So I do a lot of meditation before I go play because I want to try to release my mind from thinking about all of the other things that might impact or affect the way that I play that day. I don't want distractions. I want to be completely focused on being able to play
Hmm.
poker to the best of my ability. And so I think a lot of times things are going to come up and things happen and life happens. But as you said, if I'm in day three of a big tournament, I can't just say I'm not going to come and play that day. But it's really just about kind of staying in the moment. And that also includes when you make a bad decision or when you lose a big hand to not focus and put your energy into thinking about that. So often I see
Yeah.
players lose a huge hand and then they have this feeling of like, oh my gosh, like how can I recover from that? Or they feel really desperate all of a sudden and it affects the way that they
Hmm.
play and they start kind of playing looser and playing too many hands and making mistakes and compounding mistakes because of one thing that happened in the game early on. And so I always just kind of encourage people like, write it down in the moment, right? Like maybe write like, oh my gosh, I lost a big flip for 80% of my chips. So that after the game, you can go back and assess that situation and be like, okay, should I not have gone all in with that hand or whatever it is. But if you like allow yourself to think about it in the moment, it's preventing you from being able to make good decisions from that point forward because you're not able to kind of move on in the game,
Mhm.
and the game keeps going whether you're
Oh,
mentally
yeah.
ready for it or not. So I think things like meditation has really, really helped me. And also just realizing that the only person I'm kind of hurting in that moment by not being on top of the of my game and phoning it in is myself, right? Like it's like self-destructive to do that. So I just remember that I want to show up the best that I can.
So when you do, let's say, lose 80% of your chips, how do you deal with tilt? How do you keep that from tilt really getting to you?
I think it's again just like that being really connected to your emotions.
Mm.
It's like allowing yourself to feel that moment, but then also the
Letting it go.
ability to let it
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I practice that in other aspects of my life. And poker has taught me that is like you can't hold on to things because that will actually affect the way that you play from that point on. And so, again, just not compounding mistakes. So it's like in
Mhm.
life, if I make one wrong decision, I don't allow that to kind of cascade into all of my other decisions.
Yeah.
I don't like punish myself for that bad decision. I'm just able to kind of release it from my mind. And like I said, whatever it takes for you to release it, whether it's like this physical element of writing it down and then coming back to it later when you're not in game, whatever you need to say, like, okay, I'm just like putting a pin in it, versus like wallowing in it and like laying in that moment.
When you're in a tournament, do you actually go write down your hand histories on your phone?
Sometimes because it again makes me feel like I'm in control, right?
Mhm.
Like I'm not in control of what comes on the river. I'm not in control of like this unlucky scenario, but I am in control of like, okay, if I write this down, maybe I'll be able to pinpoint
Yeah.
something that I could have done differently. And then it also makes me feel like I'm not like telling myself to forget it because that's easier said than done. I'm just telling myself like I'm putting it on hold for now.
Can you walk us through what is your repeatable thought process in a standard poker hand? Do you have a series of questions you ask yourself on the flop, on the turn, in the river, in terms of questions you're asking yourself uh, of how you're trying to range your opponents, or what's your
Yeah.
thinking that you're going through at each of those streets?
Yeah, there's so much. I think I'll kind of separate it out into two things. So the main thing that I always tell people to think about poker within a hand is one, what do I have? What does my opponent have? And
Mm-hmm.
what does my opponent think I have?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that layered kind of thought process that you talk about is like sometimes people get too fixated on just what their hand is, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe what their opponent's hand is, that they stop to think about the third level, which is what does my opponent think that I have? Because that's where the bluffs get constructed.
Right.
That's where those other elements can come in, where you can find ways to win the pot without actually having a good hand.
And that's where the meta game really comes
Yes.
into play. Yeah.
Definitely. But then, kind of more specifically in hands, I'm thinking about very important things that you need to remember is like, what is your stack size? What is your opponent's stack
Mm-hmm.
size? If there's multiple opponents, what is the effective stack size? And the effective stack size just means the one that you have covered, the one that's
Mm-hmm.
going to be all in. So the
Right.
shortest stack that's involved in the hand is the effective stack. Because in poker, people cannot play for more than what they have in front of them. So that's important to your decision making. And then it's about kind of like, okay, well, reconstructing all of the action that happened before you. So if you're at the river, you have to have a very clear idea of who started the aggressive action before the
Mm-hmm.
flop, who was the first person to bet on the flop. Is it the same person as the person who initiated the aggressive action on the flop? And then you want to think about what bet sizings that they take. People always are like, okay, well, tell me about how do you read someone's poker face? And I always tell them, like, it's so much more nuanced than just
Yes.
looking at someone. The best tip I can give people is if you want some type of read, start with their bet sizes because people do not realize how much they might default to like a pattern in the way that they bet, right? Like some people might always bet really big when they have it because they're thinking about,
Mm-hmm.
I want to get paid off. I want to extract the most value out of my hands. But then they'll like only bet really small if they're bluffing because those people are a little more risk averse and they don't want to risk too many chips when
Yeah.
they're bluffing in case they get caught. And there's patterns in the way that they bet and how much they bet that you can pick up on over the course of playing poker poker at the same table with them for hours and hours. And so I always tell people, like, look at the bet sizing history of each player, not just in this hand, but in other hands that you've seen them play.
In my poker community, one of the reasons I joined it is that they taught me how to range your opponent at
Hmm.
each street, and more importantly, is understanding how to range them so that you can make a better decision. You can
Yeah.
find what are those opportunities. Oh, he has a capped range. This is the
Hmm.
opportunity for me to find a bluff. And then also knowing how to carry that thread of that decision through every street of
Yeah.
the flop, the turn, and the river. That is a very, very hard thing to do. And it requires so much practice. I mean, I feel I'm just at the tip of learning how
Yeah.
to do that. But I think that is, if you can do that well, and then having kind of a systematic, organized way of thinking
Hmm.
of what is the inverse if you're on the river, and what would be the inverse of what would get them to fold. Having these systematic questions
Yeah.
is really important. That's helped me improve my poker game.
Yeah.
So I think that just knowing how to get people to how to ask those questions and make
Right.
sure those questions stay consistent, because you got to be able to carry that logical thread
Yes.
across every street.
Yeah. And a lot of that just comes down to reps, like learning how to
Right.
range people in this, that, and the other. It's all really about just seeing multiple hands play out, seeing all of these different scenarios. Obviously, no poker hand is ever going to be the same because
Right.
your opponent's always going to be different. How many chips they have, how many chips you have, it's always going to be different. But one common thread that really helps you do that over and over again is just starting from this baseline of knowing, like, okay, if they raise from this position,
Right.
they should start with this range of hands. And then, as like you said, more information presents itself, you are using deductive reasoning to kind of narrow that down further and further. And that ultimately ends up
Yeah.
helping you guide your decision in the end.
You have said the following. I love this. It says, I'm happy to always start from the bottom of something and work my way up. I know that if I ever want to be good at something, you have to dedicate a lot of time, effort, and energy. I have never shied away from that. I think honestly, that is what makes me a successful poker player. Poker is a very hard industry to get into and stay in, especially for a woman. How do you balance putting in that time, effort, and energy and not let poker consume yourself? Because we talk about how poker is a zero-sum game.
Hmm.
It's a beautiful game, but it's a zero-sum game.
Right.
And if you make your entire identity focused on that, that can create a lot of problems on its own.
Hmm.
But you then also, to get good at poker, you have to almost throw yourself in it. You have to dedicate so much
Yeah.
time, effort, and energy. So how do you how do you balance that, especially at these for a lot of my community groups who are in these low to mid stake players who want to get really good, who are
Hmm.
pursuing poker professionally?
Hmm.
They don't leave place right now. They don't have other jobs. They're doing this,
Yeah.
but it's also extremely hard to
Mm.
go all in on that and then
Yes.
also not be balanced.
Yeah, I think for me, it was initially born out of necessity, right? I think all the times that I got humbled by poker, whether I was on a downswing or I second guessed my ability to actually be a winning professional poker player, I was like, okay, I need to make sure that I always have something to fall back on or that I have other interests so that in these moments when I am kind of consumed with this doubt of whether I should keep pushing forward, it
Mhm.
kind of forced me to have other things that would kind of bring everything back into focus, which is
Mhm.
like, okay, I still want to pursue poker seriously, but in the moments where I feel like I've let myself down or the game has kind of let me down in a way because I'm getting very unlucky or whatever, I always feel like I needed to have those other things to make me want to continue and push forward. Because if I didn't have those things, like things that made me feel good about myself, other things that I enjoyed doing, other things that I was good at, other things where this element of luck didn't play a factor, where I could feel really confident all of the time. I think those things kind of helped me realize that I can bring and have that same confidence in poker, even when it knocks me down. But it's definitely not easy to be like a small to mid stakes grinder trying to make it because a lot of the times you only want to think about kind of the upside of like, oh, I just want
Yeah.
to keep moving up stakes. I want to just, and you're not really kind of tempering that with are you good enough to move up stakes? So I always encourage people, like, the boring parts of poker is what is going to give you that longevity. It's about keeping track of your wins and your losses, right?
Right.
Don't guesstimate. Don't just be like, no, I'm win most of the time. Like, that's not really going to help you figure out, am I ready to move up stakes? Am I beating the stakes that I'm playing at?
Yeah.
What is my hourly? Is my hourly playing cash games actually sustainable to be able to make a living? I think a lot of parts of poker is very glamorized, seeing people win tens of millions of dollars on the World Series of Poker main event. And then people just think like, okay, I just want to get to that point, that they're willing to sometimes risk everything or risk too much or play outside of their bankroll. And I always tell people, like, if you want longevity in this game, then you have to do not only do you have to do the work, but you have to do the boring parts of poker that, like, might not seem fun, like the studying, like the keeping track of your bankroll and having discipline in all of these
Mhm.
ways.
Playing in games that maybe you are a little bit boring for you,
Yeah,
but you're just, if you move up stake, it's going to create too much variance. You're
right,
not quite ready for that.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I play the 5-5 games at Hollywood Park,
Okay.
and I it's $500 max, and
Yep.
everyone, so many of my poker communities, Raquel, you're only playing up till 100 big blinds because it's $500 max, and you should go up, go to Hustler, go to Commerce, play these higher stakes where you can get to play 200 big blinds. And I'm just, what, I want to get really good
Mm-hmm.
at this level first,
Yep.
really, really good. It might take several more years because I only play on weekends, and then
Mm-hmm.
I can move up. That's, for me, is also part of the studying. It's
Yep.
doing the studying, even though I don't play often. When I do play, it's not the highest amounts, but it's enough for me to, I have that discipline to know that
Mm-hmm.
it's, um I need to get really good at this level first before I even think about going up.
Yeah. And it's also about being comfortable with being able to make the same decisions in a game where it's a 500 cap
Right.
versus an uncapped like game, right? It's like you have to put the time in at these stakes so that okay, I know I'm very confident in what decision I have to make. Like if I have to go for this bluff, whether it's I'm risking $500 or $1,000, and you
Hmm.
won't be able to do that unless you put some restrictions on yourself first, and you can do that over and over again.
You talk about other interests, to get to have people who are playing poker professionally develop other interests outside of poker.
Mhm.
Talk about what are other areas where, let's say, mid-stake, not low stake, like mid-stake grinders, where are other areas where they can find opportunities to make money if they're playing poker? But let's say, they don't want to make their whole identity of it. What other recommendations would you give a mid-stake grinder of how they can find other sources of income outside of directly just playing poker?
Yeah, so there's kind of like two different income streams. There's like the poker adjacent stuff, right? Like I feel
Mhm.
like whether it's coaching poker or I've kind of become a person that will teach poker seminars to people in corporate environments, and you don't necessarily need to be the world's best player in order to do that because there's just so many people in different environments that are
Mhm.
willing to learn from a very beginner level.
Mhm.
And so the poker adjacent stuff is kind of finding ways to teach poker, coach poker, kind of talk about these ways of like making calculated decisions and taking calculated risks. But then there's also the non poker stuff that poker kind of has taught me to do. Like I've kind of become a better investor, right? I feel like
Mhm.
some of my poker winnings, I've always had a really steadfast rule of like, okay, 30% of my winnings in poker will be put towards investing in something or doing something with it that will allow me to build a nest egg. And I feel
Mhm.
like poker has made me kind of a better investor, but it's also allowed me to kind of critically look at other opportunities, whether it's kind of starting a business with my friends or looking at how I can advise my friends and consult my friends that are trying to uh, they're in a startup or they're in an environment where they're looking to kind of make a leap and take risks and things like that. So I feel like I've kind of become an advisor to people that are willing to kind of take a big risk in their life and stepping outside of their comfort zone. Um, but there's also like some areas of like content creation with
Mhm.
poker and like the overlaps of poker that I feel like is kind of helpful. And I feel like that also keeps poker fresh in your brain. Sometimes when I don't want to play, I find that either teaching people about poker or talking about poker in these ways really help keep like the strategy of what poker is about at the forefront of my mind, even if it doesn't involve me sitting down and playing all the time.
I find that poker has really made me a better entrepreneur. It's made me a better business owner,
Mm-hmm.
and really understanding just kind of thinking about those Bayesian methods of what are my assumptions that I have at
Yeah.
any possible with any business dealing I have, and then how are those assumptions being recalibrated based on new information, new evidence. It's made me a much better, more effective leader, more effective uh, person when it comes to putting negotiations, to putting
Hmm.
deals. So I this is why I it's such a great hobby, even though I'm not a professional.
Yeah.
I take it so seriously because it teaches you so much. And
Yep.
I think and then if you talk about the community, I think it's really I've met such interesting people
Hmm.
who are in that who love the poker too, because it is a very small world. It's your own language when you're
Yes.
talking to other people. You're talking just language that nobody else understands. And these are such interesting people I've come across who
Hmm.
are also poker players, but they're leading such interesting lives in other parts of what and in their other lives. So I
Yeah.
love that community that I think people, if you can find, especially in this world of AI, if you can find a way to create a community of people
Hmm.
who really are passionate about something,
Yeah.
especially with poker, I think that's a really great thing.
Yeah. And that's like the thing I love the most about poker. I think people are like, well, what has poker brought you in your life that you feel like is like invaluable? So not only has it like taught me this way of strategically thinking about so many different things, but it's just meeting people from all
Hmm.
different walks of life. But poker is this intersection where anybody can play this game. Anybody can learn this game. Anybody can have access to this game. It doesn't really matter your background or where you're from. And so I've met so many interesting people, and it's kind of
Yeah.
allowed me to develop other interests outside of poker, is speaking to these people about their interests and things that they're doing in their lives for a profession or whatnot. And those things have like allowed me to develop all of these other interests outside of poker that I would have never been able to explore had I not met these people at the table.
Hmm. With GTO now really taking over, I mean, it's changed how poker is played. You know, and
Hmm.
solvers and Flopzilla is now available to the
Yeah.
masses. Um, has it been harder to maintain an edge at the higher levels of poker, would you say?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. And I feel like that's also like a cautionary word that I want to have with people getting into poker now, is
Mhm.
just to realize that getting to the highest levels are going to be a lot more difficult now than 10, 20 years ago, because people have way more access to information
Mhm.
than they did before. And so I think for me, I just always, again, have a really strong sense of where I'm at in the game. It's like being really honest with yourself about, like, okay, what stakes should I be playing where I feel like I am very comfortably beating my competition, right? It's kind of like
Mhm.
nowadays it's always like, oh, now there's like $100,000 buy-in tournament. There's like $1 million buy-in
Mhm.
tournament. And like there's this allure of being like, oh, well, I want to play the highest stakes and I want to be able to win the biggest prize pool in poker history. But it's also about like, are you actually better than these people? Are
Right.
you putting in the time to
Right.
being to excelling in this game? And so I always tell people, like, you have to have a very, very good idea of where you're at relative to the people that you're playing against, because the beauty of poker is you only have to be better than the people that you're playing against. You only have to beat your table, right? So game selection is so important now. I tell people, like, don't have such a big ego that you're not willing, like, you walk into a casino and normally your game is 5-5, but maybe you look at that table and it's full of regulars and people that are pretty good. Then maybe that day you play 1-3 instead, right? Like maybe you have that honest talk with yourself to be like, okay, but it's not going to be weird or embarrassing for someone to see me playing at 1-3. Like I have to remember it's not about that. It's about today that game looks really tough. And instead of kind of beating my head against the wall, playing against people that I know are really good, I'm going to go play in a game that's softer, that is going to allow me to have a better win rate where
Mhm.
the spots are going to be softer.
Yeah, knowing being able to have game selection and having the humility to be what this might be not what I would normally play, but this is a game I can win.
Yeah.
Um, do you feel people the strategy of poker is different now than it was when you started playing? And how do
Hmm.
you think the strategy's evolving now? We're in the solver worlds where it's basically calculations. If you can memorize things at
Yeah.
like those high levels, you can play well. But where do you see it going?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely night and day from when I first started. I feel like where it's going is like there's no kind of real limitations to where the solvers can go and take the
Mhm.
game of poker, I feel like not only is information more readily available, but at an exponentially quicker speed. Solvers are getting better, but I will say that poker will never truly be a solved game m- for two reasons. One, because of the multiplayer dynamic in the sense of there's 9 players, whereas chess is a solved game now
Mhm.
because you're only playing against one person. But in
Yeah.
poker, you're playing against so many different people, but also because of this element, again, of that human element that solvers will never be able to account for. So I think, like, more than ever, while it's important to have this fundamental basis in solvers and knowing how to use them and also knowing how to apply them, because a lot of
Mhm.
people mistakenly apply concepts they learn from solvers into their game, because solvers will tell you what the answer is, but they don't really give you like the why. You
Yeah.
kind of have to figure out the why. And so sometimes people struggle with, like, they can memorize, but they can't really apply it to a totally different situation if the concept is the same. Um, and so there's that, but there's also just not forgetting that the reason why the Phil Hellmuths and the Phil Ivies and the Daniel Negreanu's of the world are still so good at poker is because they have mastered the human element. It's not because they're studying more than this 25-year-old
Mhm.
wonder kid, right? It's literally because they have never forgotten how to use kind of what they've learned of, like, exploiting people's weaknesses and things like
Mhm.
that, and to be able to factor that into their decision making, because nowadays a lot of players forget about that and they just want
Yeah.
to play like the
Like solve
solver.
and exact
Yeah.
and that's where the art form of poker really comes in.
Hmm.
Is that's where learning how to be creative comes in, is understanding what are those lines based on all of the information, all of the data that you're picking up. Where are the lines where you either you okay, this is the opportunity to bluff, or he has it.
Yeah.
He's like he based on this line, based it's this is not the opportunity to go. So I
Hmm.
think that's that human element, I think, is what makes poker so much fun and so exciting, even with all of the solvers out there
Yeah.
available. Where do you see it changing? Do you see it changing drastically? Because I've only been playing 5 years. How long have you been playing?
20
20.
professionally.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you only play tournaments now, pretty much?
I primarily focus in tournaments, but I still play some cash games from time to time.
Okay. And where do you now see how poker is going to be evolving to? Do you see it change? Because it's changes drastically
Hmm.
since you've been playing. And I
Yeah.
think even since I started playing 5 years ago, I feel it's changed
Hmm.
drastically. And I almost feel now to be in the same place, you have to be on that treadmill. You have
Yes.
to just to be able to play at the same, you
Yeah.
make the same win rate. You have to be on that treadmill
Hmm.
just to be the same. So how do you get better? I ask myself that.
Yeah.
Yes.
You can definitely fall behind so quickly in
Yeah.
poker now because the strategy is evolving so quickly. But I think the way to kind of stay on pace or ahead of your competition is just, like, really, really simply outwork them. Because
Mm-hmm.
again, the solver element can be really boring. It can be really
Mm-hmm.
boring to tell somebody, oh, here's this really fun game. But in order to be good at it, you have to sit in front of a computer and, like, look at these outputs for
Mm-hmm.
hours. It could be really, really tedious for people to study in that way because all people want to do once they learn poker is play, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't
Yeah.
want to do
Yeah.
simulations. They don't want to, like, pretend play and look at scenarios. They want to
Yeah.
be in the game. So it's really just about, like, separating kind of like the fun from the discipline that you need to be able to stay ahead of your opponents. But also, I will say, like, live poker is always going to be softer than online. So for people
Yeah.
that are trying to become a professional poker player in today's world, I would always just tell them stick to the live aspect of poker, because with online poker, the players are just much, much tougher. And
Mm-hmm.
also, unfortunately, sometimes they have these tools at their disposal while they're playing online. So you can't completely you rule out the fact that you're not sometimes playing against a computer or playing against even a bot or something like
Yeah.
that. But I will say, with how many new players that are coming into the game now, especially like the pandemic, after we saw like a huge boom in poker and new players coming through. I think, again, you would be surprised at how many of those players don't study and don't have, even though they could have access to the tools, they don't actually use the tools at their disposal. So just kind of knowing what's out there and knowing what you can kind of learn from and have access to already puts you way ahead of the person at Hollywood Park that you're sitting next to. Because again, people don't have the discipline to do what it takes to sit down and learn when all they want to do is just the fun part, right?
How many hours would you say you focus a week? If you're actually on tour, you're practicing, you're
Mhm.
on the tour, how many hours would you devote to studying, running through solvers, talking to people about hands, going through hand histories versus actually playing?
Yeah, so it kind of depends. Like if I'm going through a phase where I'm playing a lot,
Mm-hmm.
then it's almost like a continuous cycle of like
Mm-hmm.
playing, then talking about the hands that I played, and then learning and putting it into a solver. I would say in the downtime of when I'm not on tour, I would say probably like at this point in my game, maybe like 6 to 8 hours a week. It's actually not as much as people think once you get to a certain level, right? I
Mm-hmm.
would I would say that the more time you've been in the game and the more time you've played around with the solvers, kind of the less studying you have to do like in these really short increments of time.
Do you have a particular solver you to use?
I think the one out there right now that is most user friendly is probably one called GTO Wizard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But those simulations are limited because there's other solvers where you're actually using computer power to run the simulations.
Mm-hmm.
But GTO Wizard has run all the simulations for you, but they're not able to run every permutation, right? So their
Right.
database is limited, but you don't have to have the computing power and you don't have to sit there and wait for like 2 hours for
Right.
your computer to solve it using GTO Wizard. You're kind of just accessing their database of pre-solved scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
But it is the most user friendly. So it is the one where it's like the quickest, where it's like I could literally be on break from a tournament and I can go on my phone and go to
Exactly.
GTO Wizard and look up something that happened 30 minutes ago. And so I think because of how easy it is to access at your fingertips, I think I use that and I most poker pros use that. But if you want something kind of more in depth, then you would have to use some of the other more traditional solvers. But I think that at this stage, especially for you or for your friends in your community and the people that are like learning how to get to the next level and play from low to mid stakes to higher stakes, I think something like GTO Wizard would be like such a valuable tool for them to just play around with. And it's not that hard to learn how to
Mm-hmm.
use.
I mean, I've had an account with GTO Wizard, and then I got rid of the account, and now I just use Flopzilla, and I
Hmm.
and I just study with friends on who know how to use it. And I think that has been more helpful for
Yes.
me. So that's the part of the community, is looking and reviewing a simulation, reviewing a hand through the solver and talking about it. I feel that has been more helpful to me than
Yeah,
just because it's so complicated. I mean,
it
it's
is.
so mathematical. I mean, it's just so technical, so
Yes.
complicated. When you have said that, when I tell people that I'm a poker player, a lot of them react by giving me a weird look. Talk about the stigma of poker. Do you feel there is still a stigma to playing a professional poker player today?
I do, and it's kind of unfortunate because I would think that after being in this industry for 20 years that
Mm-hmm.
that might have changed, that maybe now I don't feel as sheepish kind of telling
Mm-hmm.
somebody about it. But I still do, and I almost feel like I always have to qualify it with like, because I know their next question is like always going to be like, oh, their next question is either, do you count cards? Which I'm like, okay, no,
Mm-hmm.
wrong game.
Yeah,
But
exactly. That's blackjack, not poker.
right. So
Right.
you can already tell their mindset is
Yeah.
looking at it as if
Yeah.
it's a
Or
casino
they're
game
like,
that you're
"Oh, you're
gambling.
a professional gambler," and
Right. So that's one follow-up question. Or there are other follow-up question is you can actually make a living playing poker, right? So
Mm-hmm.
they're like just so it's like mind-boggling for them. They
Mm-hmm.
can't even wrap their head around it.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I always have to kind of explain. Like it's never just like a simple answer of I play poker for a living without having to have all of these follow-up statements. And so I think it's just about the fact that I think people don't recognize it as a skill game that it is. People put chess on such a pedestal, right? People who
Mm-hmm.
play chess are viewed as like highly intelligent, and like these are the people that you feel like are using critical and strategic thinking all of the time. But poker, it's almost just like they think it's a feel game. They think you're just
Mm-hmm.
like deciding you want to play this hand,
Mm-hmm.
and then so I it's unfortunate that I feel like I've had to defend poker so much because I do still think the mainstream media still portrays it kind of as gambling. Like, why is it that sports betting is legal but online poker isn't, right? It's also just the way that it's viewed under the lens of like what is socially acceptable, but also what is legally
Mm-hmm.
okay. So,
And for people who are in those mid stakes games, who are not at your level, who are you've obviously an accomplished poker player, being the number two WSOP women in the top in that list. For people who are not in that level, who are just trying, who are
mhm.
trying to make a living off of this, how and they call themselves a professional poker player, yet they get a lot of looks from their families and their friends and kind of looks of concerns. What advice would you give to them to help them deal with that stigma?
I mean, honestly, especially with close friends and family, I say try to teach them the game first. Try to
Mm-hmm.
cultivate an interest in the game for them so that they can play for themselves to really see and understand what it's about. Poker is such a hard game to explain to
It
somebody
is.
and for them
Yeah.
to understand how it works.
Yeah.
But people love games, right? So if you can actually sit down with someone and teach them the game of poker, once they play and understand that there is so much strategy behind
Mm-hmm.
it, it's almost easier for them to accept it. But also, just I think pointing out very specific things like if you keep track of your wins and losses, if it's like a family member that's concerned about your ability to make a sustainable living,
Mm-hmm.
you can show them, like, I've tracked my hourly and this is my hourly that I'm making. And also, I always tell people, like, make sure that you have it separated. So you have like a poker bankroll and then you have like a life bankroll, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
make sure that your family and your friends don't have to worry about you financially because you are planning for the times that you have a downswing.
How did you tell your parents? I'm sure back then the stigma was even more back
Yeah.
then. So how did you get them to like embrace your career choice as a poker pro?
I didn't tell them for a
You
while. I
didn't.
was I just straight up lied to them. Like, I had graduated college and I
Uh-huh.
told them I was taking a year off before I was going to go to grad school,
Mm-hmm.
but what I was really doing was just like playing poker. So they thought I was like traveling for fun.
Mm-hmm.
But what I was really doing was traveling and playing poker tournaments. And so I didn't tell them for a while. But I think it just got to a point where I had been doing it long enough and I wasn't relying on them for money. I was like financially stable. And I think it was the point where I just came to them maybe a year and a half after I had been playing professionally to tell them that this is what I've been doing. And then to kind of show them, like, okay, well, the proof is in the pudding, in the sense of like, I haven't had to ask you guys for money. I have been able to like make enough income to kind of sustain this lifestyle that I have. Like, they know that I've been traveling, they know that I haven't been home and that I've been able to like maintain that lifestyle without their help. So I think like I just waited until I had enough ammo to go to them to say, I've been doing this. This is my Hendon Mob results. These are kind of, this is the amount of money I've made this year playing tournaments. And so you don't have to worry about where I'm getting my money from.
Mm-hmm.
It was hard for them to understand, again, and wrap their head around this idea of like playing a game for a living. But I think there's not much that could be said once they see that I'm doing
They
okay.
saw the results. And
Yeah.
how did your mom, who was this very traditional mom, wanted you to take this very traditional route? How did she take that at first?
She took it so horribly. She was obviously like coming to me with like, she was like crying and she was like, she had tears in her eyes. She was like, the casino is nowhere, no place for a woman. She was like, you did not go to college and graduate and do
Uh-huh.
all of this and get your degree to like go and play poker. I think her feeling like there's a chance that I would always maybe go back to something in law or
Yeah.
communications kind of helped her get through that initial period because she knew I had something to fall back on, which is why I also tell like a lot of people that are younger now, I'm like, just don't drop out of school, not just
Mm-hmm.
to have the backup plan, but like, because if that your family's going to have a tough time accepting this, that's one way to just quell some of that doubt and some of the fear that they might have for you, is to know that you do have something else that you can do if poker doesn't work out. Um, because just like so many other industries, like there's always going to be situations where you're going to end up having to pivot, where
Yeah.
your idea of what you want to do or what you're going to become when you're older doesn't work out and it doesn't pan out. And so it's important to always have other interests and to have things that you also love to do. And that's why I think pokers can be very blurry, because it's like a hobby, and it could be a hobby and a profession. And that's why
Mm-hmm.
poker ends up consuming people, because like there's not a lot of jobs that people can do, but they love doing it, that they
Yeah.
can't get enough of it, right? Like how many
Yeah.
people go home from their like 9 to 5 and be like, oh, I can't wait to do more of this.
Yeah.
But poker is one of those things. And that's why it could become such a big part of your life but that's why you really have to make a conscious effort to kind of separate it out from the other parts of who you are and your identity and things that you liked before you discovered poker.
Talking about your other parts of your identity. You have said that music is my passion, even more than poker. I
Mhm.
love music and I enjoy singing even more than I enjoy playing poker.
Yeah.
I love that because it really, I mean, that's the creative artist in you is
Mhm.
your music and your singing, even more than being the number two professional poker player in the world.
Yeah, and I think I'm lucky in the sense of poker was like my second or maybe my third love, right? It wasn't my first love. I think my first love was like music and
Mm-hmm.
performing and things like that. So I already had that before I discovered poker. But also, I think music is one of those things where you feel like you're, like you said, creating something. And that's
Mm-hmm.
something in poker that sometimes I'm missing out on is again, just
Yeah.
like feeling like maybe I'm helping other people or that I'm creating something that other people can
Yeah.
share and enjoy. And I don't feel like I do that in poker, but music is the way that I feel like I'm like contributing in some way to
Oh,
making
yeah.
the world more beautiful,
Yes,
right?
exactly. There's that. And that I think is such an important part. That is, I think, the biggest distinction that I have seen in poker. As much as I love the game, it's taught me so much. There is one area where poker and life are diametrically opposed. Poker
Hmm.
is a zero-sum game
Yeah.
and life is not.
Yeah.
And you have to find areas in your life where you're generating, you're creating,
Hmm.
you're building something. And as much
Hmm.
as I love poker, it's totally transactional. And you
Right.
have to think in a mindset that recognizes that
Yeah.
transactional quality of poker. Um, One of the things I've loved about what you've done in your career is you have you, you obviously have a very strong left and right side part of your brain. It's very obvious in that where you approach music as your passion. Um, how do you approach your creative passions, music, performing, even though they don't bring you the financial rewards that poker would bring you? How do you try to connect to that side, even though it doesn't bring you those financial rewards?
I think it's because it fulfills a different side of
Mm,
me. I think, like, yes, I feel very grateful that poker has become this game that I love, but has been able to provide me that stability financially. But I think music is something that I continue to foster because I feel like I will always get some type of gratification from music, even if I don't, there's no winning and there's no losing
hmm
in music, right? It's just about
It's just
doing,
generating, it's
right?
creating. Yeah,
Yeah, and so I think like I always want to pour into music even if it doesn't offer me any financial benefits because I get so many
I
other
agree.
benefits out of it.
Yeah, I mean, as for me, my creative expression is really through journalism. It's through writing,
Mhm.
and I've written a book. I'm working on my second book right now. It will be published this year.
Amazing.
But it doesn't writing doesn't pay you.
Yeah.
It's through my businesses where I make my income.
Mhm.
But I made a deal with myself that I will not let my art form be the area of how I choose to make my money.
Right.
It's let my art form give it the space to breathe,
Mhm.
to give it the room to just do what you want to just because you love it,
Right.
and then find a way to make your money in other
Mhm.
areas of your life.
Yeah.
And that's for me has been how I've approached my art in terms of writing and journalism and doing the travel work I do. So it's not putting so much pressure on my art form, my writing,
Mhm.
my journalism, to force it to become
Yeah.
my financial provider.
Right. And I think that's also what keeps your love for it really pure, right? Is because you're not relying on it necessarily to make money. Because I
Yeah.
think that's where some of my love for poker has like waned throughout the years is the times when I was almost like desperate for it to net me like money that
Mm-hmm.
I almost forgot why started to play and love the game in the first place, right? But when you have these other outlets that you're not necessarily looking to give you like this financial gain, then you feel like you can always love it for what it really is and
Right.
the joy that it brings you at its core.
But you also, in order to do that, you need to have a very strong left and right side part of your brain. And you need to
Yeah.
know to utilize those different parts of your game. And they require very, very different energies, very different mindsets.
Hmm.
And it is, I would say, one of the biggest ways I've evolved in my life is understanding how to use my left side brain versus my right side brain. When I starting out in my career, I was in banking. I was really focused on that sort of left side brain. And then when I started my business, my identity was so much tied to being a business owner. And it's
Hmm.
actually taken living in LA the last 13 years. I have become first an artist and a
Yeah.
businesswoman second because I've tapped into that creative part of my brain. But that's not easy. And I think a lot
Hmm.
of people, maybe people who are predominantly hyper analytical, they don't
Hmm.
think they have a creative side. But I
Yeah,
think it's really important to try to connect with that creative side, whatever it is.
for
And
sure.
then for the same people, a lot of people who are musicians, for example, who are
Hmm.
artists, who are really leading more with their right side of their brain, how do they try to tap into their left side of their brain?
Yeah.
I think that's a real balance.
Yes, definitely.
How you talk about meditation, and I read that you are a real you have a very strong spiritual side.
Hmm.
Can you talk about what is your meditation practice? Can you walk us through how do you connect with that spiritual side?
Yeah, I think it's like a combination of grounding, right? So just like spending
Mm-hmm.
time in nature, I
Yes.
think helps me connect um, to like my higher sense of self, but also
Mm-hmm.
helps me disconnect from all of the things around me, like just being able to like not have access to my devices. I spend some time where I have it, where I call it like OTG, where I just go off the grid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it just allows me to kind of like free myself from all of the stuff that goes on in your day-to-day life that kind of distracts you from like feeling more purposeful, I think,
Mm-hmm.
and intentional. And sometimes I feel like because I have a hyper analytical mind, like it's hard to really like calm my brain down. And so sometimes I will just need like very active guided meditation because me just kind of sitting there in silence doesn't allow for me to shut my brain off. But kind of like the breathing techniques that you learn in guided meditation kind of really helps bring me back and centers me in that moment. Um, and yoga and also physical activity and physical fitness is a part of that
Oh
too. Like
yeah,
I consider that very
I
meditative
agree.
because it's like
You're
when
moving
you're
in your body.
yeah, you have
Yeah.
to be very very present
Yeah.
to be able to do certain things like in reformer Pilates. If I'm like checked out for 1 second, I won't even be able to
Right.
like hold the plank or do what I'm supposed to be doing. And so it just makes you focus in on what you're doing in that moment, which just helps you be present.
Do you practice transcendental meditation or talk about the guided meditations that you like to do?
Yeah, I actually use an app called Calm, which I'm sure a lot
Okay.
of people
Yeah.
are familiar with. So a lot of that is really just coupling kind of certain prompts that kind of
Mm-hmm.
make you kind of turn inward and breathing. So a lot of those guided meditations are just like 5 or 10 minutes of just like spreading your breath from the top of your head all the way down to your toes so
Mm,
that you're really feeling in your body instead of kind of like sometimes I feel like our body and our brains are so disconnected
very much
and
so.
just trying to make it kind of function as one and bring it all together as a whole.
In your spiritual practice, what are the answers you're trying to ask yourself in terms of what is really bringing meaning, fulfillment, and happiness to your life? How do you try to approach those bigger questions within the spiritual framework?
Yeah, I feel like I get really like philosophical sometimes and like I'm always thinking a little bit more about like just questions that go beyond like me and maybe this world even. I think
Mm,
a lot about like potential afterlife things and
mm,
things like that. And I feel like when I meditate and when I'm kind of like bring it all back to that, like I think I'm just trying to strip myself away from all of the things in life that I think really cloud kind of what your true purpose is.
mm.
I think meditation and what I focus on is just like bringing everything back to my core values. I think it just kind of reminds me of what are the most important things in my life and like what my priorities should be because there's so many like outside noise, whether it's through social
Oh
media
yeah.
or whatnot, that
Yeah.
tells you you should value this over you should value like success or you should or there's this like this toxic kind of like positivity sometimes of like
Yeah.
where you have to just like you have to keep going no matter what, and sometimes I just allow myself to like be in whatever those feelings are, even if they might be a little bit negative, just so that I can be more aware of kind of what's holding me back in my life.
Being aware of what are those things that innately are motivating you, or through peer pressure, through social media,
Hmm.
that's motivating you, is super, super, so important to have that awareness. Dr. Arthur C. Brooks is just this renowned, inc- he's a Buddha, and
Hmm.
he has talks about, he does this class at Harvard where he talks about your four false idols.
Mm.
And St. Thomas Augustine, who's a 13th century philosopher, basically shared that in life we have four false idols. We have money, power, pleasure, and fame.
Hmm.
And it's a really good exercise. Everybody has one idol that they gravitate toward. It's the idol, through whatever reasons, they tend to just, that's what they will connect with. And it will tend to bring them problems.
Hmm.
Do you want to go through this exercise of what is your four false idols?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
Okay. So the way you do it, so it's, you have to basically eliminate what of all those four: money, power, pleasure, fame. You have to
Hmm.
eliminate one that you would take, and you wouldn't have less. You would just have what the population mean of it is. So let's go through what money, power, pleasure, or fame. And fame is honor. It's respect.
Hmm.
It's not just being a celebrity. It's just having the honor, appreciation from your peers. If you had to give one up first to just have just the population mean, what would that be?
Probably power.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Because I don't think that that's something that I really have valued that much, or maybe value as much as other people do. I think like it's nice to think of somebody as like influential or having this ability to kind of like affect others through having power. But I always feel like power is almost kind of like forced upon people. And
Mm-hmm.
I think I rather have the respect of other people because I feel like that's more given to you, which kind of falls more into like this fame category. Is like, I feel like that is more important to me sometimes than this idea of like having power over people.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now we know power is out. So
Yeah.
now we have money, pleasure, and fame. What would be the next one you would give up just to have the population mean?
What does pleasure entail?
Pleasure is anything that gives you sensory satisfaction. It could be food, it could be
Mm,
just experiences, it could be sex, it could be sleep. I mean, pleasure is anything that
okay.
feels good.
Okay. It's getting
It's
harder, right?
harder,
And there's
exactly.
still
It's
three
getting hot,
left.
exactly.
Like,
There's three left, and this is a really good exercise to determine what could be your false idol. So yeah, so okay, we have now three now, and again, it doesn't have to be. You don't not have it. You just have the population mean of it.
okay, I think I would say pleasure then.
Okay, so
Yeah.
and why would you say that? Why?
Because I don't think I'm somebody that has always like needed like more than what is comfortable for me, right?
Mhm.
Like I enjoy different pleasures, and I feel like I really can like indulge sometimes in different things, but I've never really felt like I'm like chasing that all of the time. Like it
Okay.
doesn't give me this like high necessarily.
Okay. So power is out, pleasure's then out. Now it's getting really hot in
Yeah,
here.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so now we have money and fame. What would be the next one that you would give up to just the population mean?
I think money, because I feel like money is something that I feel like, especially in poker, that like it comes and goes. Like sometimes you can't count on
Mhm.
necessarily making a certain amount of money. That's going to fluctuate from time to time in a way that's out of your control. And I don't think I've ever kind of like worshiped this idea of having so much money, because I also know that there's just like a minimal amount of money that you can have to still have a good life. And I think it's about so many other things like your friends and your family and your
Mhm.
circle that brings you like the true wealth. So I don't think that having more than the average person money wise is necessarily going to be like something I need to be happy.
And there's a diminishing returns too
Yeah.
to money. I mean, enough is important, but after a certain amount, it's not going to bring you more happiness.
Yeah.
So now we've identified your false idol, which
Yeah.
is fame,
Yeah.
which is everyone has one. And
Mhm.
it's just understanding, the role and influence that false idol has in your
Yeah.
decision making, and realizing that chasing this idol will not lead to happiness. And I love doing this in my own spiritual practice. My false idol is pleasure. I
Mm-hmm.
love anything that feels good. I just anything that feels sensually pleasurable. I love that. And I started my own business literally because I was working in investment banking in New York.
Mm-hmm.
I hated having to get up at 5 a.m., Maria. I hated having to get up at 5 a.m. to do these market calls. And I was just, I'm going to start my own company
So you could sleep in.
just so I can sleep in, so I can set my
Yeah.
own hours. And
Yeah.
now to this day, I do not. So in this case, that pleasure, that false idol of chasing
Mm,
pleasure gave me the real motivation to
yeah.
basically start a business, not knowing anything about starting. So in a way that helped me, but also recognizing that chasing that false idol of pleasure, life isn't always about pleasure. I can't always be thinking about what is going to be the next great
Mm-hmm.
amazing meal I'm going to take. I
Right.
can't. It's not. Life isn't always about feeling great.
Yeah.
So I think it's in my own sort of spiritual practice. I like to basically recognize, sit with
Mhm.
what are the false idols that I did. How can
Yeah.
I try to go beyond that to truly find
For
meaning
sure.
into my life?
And I love this exercise because it's so weird because when you just named those four, I would have never thought that mine would have ended up being fame. But kind of when you distill it down and take away certain things one at a time, it's like
Yeah.
I would have never guessed that. And I think it's really just comes from this idea of like, I think I've always wanted acceptance from others, whether it's
Mm,
like making my parents proud or having my sister feel like I have qualities that she admires versus me always looking up to her
mhm,
and things like that. And just like also in poker, just always feeling like I have something to prove because I have a chip on my shoulder for being a woman and feeling
mhm.
like people are always diminishing my accomplishments because they never think I could be as good as my male counterpart. I think like I've been able to come to terms with that more recently, but for a long time in my life, I feel like I was always chasing kind of that acceptance from other people because I wasn't confident enough in myself to know.
And it's a powerful motivator. It
Yeah.
is a powerful chasing those false idols is a powerful motivator, but then recognizing it can get you, it can carry you so far. But
Hmm.
then as you're really trying to find the meaning of your life, as you're trying to really understand your self identity and
Hmm.
who are you really? You are more than just a poker player. I'm more than just a business owner. Recognizing what really brings meaning and fulfillment and happiness to your life, I think that is when you can kind of start to do that, you're operating, you are playing the meta game at life
Yep.
when you can do that.
Yeah.
I want to kind of end with a little bit of talk about your work in philanthropy. You are very passionate about philanthropy. You've donated your time in a lot of different charitable endeavors. You say you would love to work very closely with kids to help them gain access to education, and you are passionate about giving microloans to people in third world countries.
Hmm.
Um, and you also you say you want to be more involved with in people who are victims of domestic abuse.
Hmm.
Why these specific areas are you focused in, and what makes you passionate about philanthropy in these areas?
Yeah, I think philanthropy was my outlet of feeling like I'm giving back
Mm.
in the way that poker doesn't fulfill me, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
like I felt like that was the counterbalance to this idea that I'm always taking in poker, that I'm always
Mm-hmm.
kind of like
Yeah.
almost preying on people that are like weaker than me in the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
I hated that feeling and I felt like I needed to have something that
The
would give me the
counterbalance.
yeah, the opposite kind of effect and feeling. And so philanthropy was that for me. And I feel like why I want to work with these specific groups is really because I think about the people that are really vulnerable in the world and people that are like marginalized. And I think about
Mm-hmm.
the people that need a leg up, the people that kind of need that extra boost to kind of get them to that next level in life.
Yeah.
And a lot of that comes from, I think, just people in my life that were mentors or people that I looked up to, and even my parents' story of being kind of immigrants. I feel like everybody has or knows somebody that if only they had a different kind of path that was available to them, whether it is through a microloan or whether it is through kind of some scholarships for kids in underserved areas. Like, I think all of those things allow for the people that might not have been put in the best position and weren't lucky enough to win this life lottery of kind of being born into a specific set of circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of allows them to make something of themselves. And that's what I really love too is this idea that if you give, you don't have to give somebody the whole like blueprint. You don't have to tell them this is the path you should follow. They just need like you to plant the seed and water it for them, and they're going to be able to like grow that into something amazing and beautiful. So it's kind of like giving them the opportunity to make the most of themselves and to live up to their true potential.
I love how you have achieved your own balance in your as a person, as a woman who is so good at poker, which requires being a savage, fighting for every single pot, really being so aggressive and making money off of it, to then just giving it away.
Hmm.
And that is about it is a dichotomy of you're on work operating on two totally different spectrums,
Hmm.
but that in it of itself is the balance of going to these of how to kind of have a meaningful life. And not every people will do approach it in different ways, but I think that's a really beautiful way of how you've tried to find that balance within your own life, is really being such a just a superstar poker player, which requires such a incredible toughness, to then just, I want to now give microloans to people, give them a blueprint, help women in domestic abuse.
Yeah.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that because I think people don't think about poker playing skill sets as things that might lend itself to wanting to be involved in philanthropy. But actually, I think my biggest asset and strength in poker is the fact that I'm a huge empath and I can like
Mm-hmm.
feel people's like emotions in a hand and
Mm-hmm.
feel how much that ties into their mindset and the way that they're going to play. And I feel like that has kind of also helped me in finding philanthropy as a way for me to kind of want to be able to help people and in a way that's selfishly fulfilling, right?
Mm-hmm.
For somebody who does something that sometimes feels so unfulfilling. So I think that is the particular like skill that I feel like that I have that has really like been able to work in both of these different arenas for me.
And how are you now involved in different philanthropy projects? Are you involved in organizing charity events? Are you traveling much? What
Yeah.
are you doing?
A lot of it kind of me discovering some of these different causes actually started from these causes using poker as a vehicle to
Mm-hmm.
fundraise. And that's how I first heard of certain organizations that I've started to work with and become close to. And so now it's also about using my network and helping them connect them to people that can help them raise even more money. But also it's just about the time. Like I really pride myself on taking the time to show up for these people,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's I've gone to women's shelters and halfway homes and things like that, and like done career days with them where we practice job interviews and things like that, right? And just like
Great.
dedicating the time that I feel like poker has given me the freedom to have. Poker has allowed me to, like you, be flexible with my hours and to set my own hours in a way. And because of that, I do have the time to pour into other things and other people. And so I'm really thankful to poker for that because it has given me these liberties to do other things in my life that I find really, really important and fulfilling.
So your life truly is a balanced mix of poker, music, philanthropy,
Yeah, but it wasn't
and
always
it
that way.
wasn't, but
Like I
now it
feel like
is. Yeah.
I'm the closest I've ever been and I'm still
Mm-hmm.
continuing to work on that.
You
Yeah.
talk about having children someday.
Yeah.
Is that a goal?
Yes,
That's great.
definitely. Like I can't wait to start a family.
Okay, so how are you going to be different from your tiger mom?
I mean, I hope I will be, but like a part of me is scared that I might not be that different. Like the apple might not fall that far from the tree. But I think I just want to remind them that there is no set path because like
Mm-hmm.
I'm the example of like you can do kind of anything and you will be able to find a way to make it work as long as you are willing to put in the effort and you love it. And so I think I want to encourage them to explore
Mm-hmm.
anything that they're interested in instead of feeling so confined to a box. And what I really just want to teach my kids one day is just this ability to kind of like believe in yourself and to create these pathways that people might not have seen for.
I think you'll be a great mom, and
Thank
you'll give them
you.
a lot of just lessons in all
Yeah,
your life. And I think
I
that
hope so.
that's the beauty of being a parent, is being able to do that. What's your exercise practice? Because you have that's the thing with poker. You have to sit
Yes.
a lot of days. What do you do for
Oh
exercise?
my gosh. Like That's one thing that I realized, especially from playing poker for 20 years, is like when I was young, I could get away with like not
Yeah.
doing much, but and sitting
Yeah.
there and not feeling terrible at the end of the day.
Oh,
But
yeah.
that
As you
is
get
not
older.
happening anymore. Yeah. So I try to do like I definitely try to do some type of like physical activity before I play poker. So every single day, whether it's just walking or hiking, or if I don't have time, like again, like the grounding exercise, just
Hmm.
like going out there and just like doing some stretches on grass or something like
Yeah.
that. But I do try to incorporate 2 to 3 days of strength training plus some of this, like the yoga with Pilates, some more kind of like meditative type of exercises as well. But for me, it's really, really important to make sure that I am doing something physical before I know I'm going to sit down for like
Yeah.
8 to 10 hours because it also kind of gets that restlessness out that you might have at the
That's
poker
so
table
important.
sometimes. Yeah.
What's your favorite hike in LA?
I really love like a lot of the hikes like around Griffith Park, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Those are really nice to me. Like I'm not really like a crowded hiking person,
Mm-hmm.
so you're not really going to catch me like going on hikes in like Hollywood or Santa Monica. I feel like those are always packed with people.
Oh, and so
Um,
many in now in up in the Palisades have closed now.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So, my favorite hike of like all time though has to be Lion's Head in South Africa.
Oh
Like
my
that
goodness.
was like the
Really?
most beautiful hike I have ever been
Really?
on. Yeah.
I would say my favorite hike of all time is this place called Yakushima in Japan. It's an island and it's what Kauai basically
Uh,
was 30 years ago. It's rainforest. It's the most challenging hike I've ever done, but it's
really,
absolutely beautiful.
I can only imagine. Yeah.
You love to travel, and
I do.
do you go to Taiwan? Have you been back to Taiwan much?
Yeah, I actually pre-pandemic I was going back almost every year because I did have my family there. Like my
Mm-hmm.
grandmother who passed away like 15 years ago, when she was alive, we would always go back to see her.
Mm-hmm.
But I also still have an aunt who lives there,
Mm-hmm.
and so it was really important for me to always kind of reconnect with my origin and my culture in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Since the pandemic, I haven't gone quite as often, but poker is actually booming a lot in Asia and in
Yeah.
Taiwan and in Japan and Korea.
Yeah.
And so I can't like wait to go back just to kind of see how poker has developed in these countries.
I have some friends who just got back from Macau and they're just saying it
Yeah.
is huge there. Have you been to China much?
Mhm.
Really?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I feel like in general like I always feel so connected when I go to China or when I go to Asia because I feel like it's still just it feels like home even though it was
Mm-hmm.
never really my home.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And I'm sure that's being a poker player allows you to travel and allows you, as long as you're
Yeah,
not
very
inside the
fortunate.
casino, as long as you allow yourself that space to
Yes.
get outside of it.
Yeah.
It's a big reason why I started my own companies too, so that
Mhm.
I could travel when I wanted to travel.
Yeah. Love
Okay, so
that.
I'm going to end it with just some questions we ask all of our guests.
Okay.
Okay. This whole show is about balance. So I'm going to start asking about what are your top 3 healthiest habits that you do?
Healthiest habits, I have to say, are meditating, um, eating mindfully and well, fueling my body with the right things, and getting adequate sleep.
That's so important.
Yes.
Sleep is so important. I have a principle that says part of balance is having healthy vices.
Hmm.
And healthy vices are things that are not necessarily good for you, but they bring you great joy.
Yeah.
So, what would you say are your top 3 healthy vices?
I feel like one has to be like a really great cocktail. I mean, or just like a really smooth tequila. Like I'm a
Mm-hmm.
big tequila girl, so I
Mm-hmm.
do enjoy like the occasional drink. Sometimes when I'm playing, but
Mm-hmm.
not recommended for
Right.
everybody. Another vice would be watching trashy reality television. Like I'm not gonna lie, I love like where I can just shut my brain off, probably
Mm-hmm.
because I'm thinking
Yeah.
about so many things so often. But Below Deck is one of my favorites. Like
Mm-hmm.
I just love having something on where like I don't have to fully pay attention, but it still like captures my interest. My third vice would probably just be like food. Like I really love indulging.
Oh, I know. I love food too. I mean, I love it. I just have to also be careful that I don't get so obsessed with having a great meal
Yeah.
every single meal, because then I'm going to have to do another marathon. So, okay, what are small things you do every day to try to achieve balance?
One is just gratitude journaling. Like
Mhm.
it's been really important to kind of just like wake up and feel like you have things to be grateful for, because so quickly, whether it's like you see the news on your phone or you check a message, so quickly can you just be brought down to this place of like all of the pressures of like day-to-day life, that I feel like it's so important to start from a place of feeling like there's things to be happy for, there's things to be grateful for. And then that way, when you move through your day with all of these other stressful things, it kind of like gives you that sense of like calm and
Yeah.
peace.
Yeah, no, I think always starting your day with like, gratitude is
Hmm.
such an important piece. Then it just puts the problems in perspective when you can just know what you're blessed. So when you start your day off knowing I have so much to be blessed for.
Yeah.
What does wealth mean to you?
Hmm. I think wealth means to me just having a really great support system. I think it's about the people in your life. I feel like, especially now, I just value my time with my family so much, that I feel like really, really rich in that department is just like being able to like have them 5 minutes, live 5 minutes away from me, and just being able to like have that quality time
Oh, that's
all
so
of the
nice.
time is so important. And I just think it's being able to like enjoy the things that you love is wealth to me. And so I feel like I make sure to fill my days with things that I love doing.
That's great. What are the top 3 books that you recommend most often?
Um, so the first one has to be Ikigai, which,
Okay.
speaking of Japan,
Uh-huh.
it's kind of a book about the way that the Japanese people live their life to be kind of happy and healthy, but in a way that's like a little minimalist, in a way
Mm,
where they're really focused on building communities around them. And I've always just kind of really loved
really?
the way that Japanese people live their life. I think there's a lot we can learn
Oh,
from
yeah.
them, their respect that they have for each other,
Mhm.
how kind of like orderly their society is, even though they're a very densely populated
Mhm.
place, and just how so many parts of Japan are in blue zones where people are living till they're in their hundreds, and that's a lot of that has to do with like staying active and having a purpose, and also building communities around you, and always having that socialization, not being
So
isolated.
Ikigai.
Yes.
Okay, who's the author of that?
Um, Manuel something, I
Okay.
cannot
All right.
remember,
We'll
but
find it. We'll put it in
yes,
the show
if you
notes.
put in Ikigai, Ikigai, you'll be able to. It's
Okay.
like it's a light blue cover.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
All right. And you have 2 other
Atomic
books.
Habits by
Yes.
James Clear. I feel
Mhm.
like that is a book that I only read maybe like a couple years ago, so pretty recently, and I feel like it's something that I've always been really overwhelmed by. Is like, how do I create good habits? Like, I know I have bad habits. How do I kind of rid myself of them? And it was always like really overwhelming to kind of tackle it. But that book has just really taught me like just little small steps and little small actions creates kind of this consistency in your routine that allows you to have good habits. And again, like I feel like poker is something where I don't have a lot of structure in my life sometimes, right? Because
Mhm.
1 minute you're going to one place and then you're going to another place, and there's not like that one thing that feels very stable. Like even my income doesn't feel very stable at times, but I feel like something that gives me stability is having a good routine and having good habits.
That's so important. Okay, if you could have one single message on a billboard on what it takes to achieve the combination of health, wealth, and happiness, what would that message be?
I think that message would be just kind of living in your most authentic self. I feel like all of my problems, or all of kind of like my insecurities, always stemmed from just feeling like I had to be a version of myself for other people, or because of what was socially acceptable or what would please other people. And I think now I'm really coming into this place in my life where I realize that just being myself is the thing that will bring me the most joy and make me the most happy, is just like pursuing life in a way that feels true to who I am.
That's wonderful. And is there anything else that you would like to leave our viewers with, Maria?
Just that I hope that if you're watching this and you've never played poker before, that you will just call a friend. Everybody has a friend that knows how to play poker. Just call a friend
Yes.
that knows how to play poker and learn the game, and just give it a chance to really show you how beautiful that game is, but also just how much relevance it has to other aspects of your life. And I think people will be really pleasantly surprised. I mean, they will very likely get hooked. So maybe you'll have some new players in your
Would
Hollywood
love
Bart
that.
game soon. But like
Yeah.
that's my hope, is just people kind of understanding poker better and seeing all of the different ways it can translate in their
Well,
lives.
thank you for being an advocate for poker, especially to female players. Let's get more female players to play
Yes.
poker. Where can people find you on social media?
On Instagram, they can find me at Maria_ho. On X, Maria Ho. I don't use TikTok that often. I'm like just too old for that, I think. But I do have a TikTok account. It's the real Maria Ho.
Okay, wonderful. Maria, thank you so much for being on the show. I really, really appreciated this. Just so grateful to have you here.
Yeah, it was so nice talking to you, and I just love finding women that love poker. So I feel like we need to play poker
I would
soon.
love that. I would absolutely love it. You will kill me, I feel like, but I would love that still, anyways. To everyone watching, thank you so, so much for supporting the Mega Podcast. Thank you for watching. I love you all so, so much. If you liked this episode, please click on the like and subscribe buttons. It helps the YouTube algorithm promote this podcast to other people who are interested in balance. And thank you for your support. I love you all so much. Until next time. Mwah.